Okay, so I think we're about ready to go. Now this session will be recorded. About an hour after the session has ended, you will receive an email with a link that will invite you to register first before viewing the video. And again, you should see that about an hour after the class has ended. Now, just a few basic items before we move forward. With regards to the GoToTraining application, if it's blocking any part of your view, you can minimize GoToTraining by clicking on the orange button with the white arrow. It's located on a tab sticking out of the left side at the top of that GoToTraining program. And if you were to click on that orange button with the white arrow in it, that should hide the controls. You will only see the small tab, and you could just click on the orange button once again in order to see the full control panel and to have access to the chat option at the very bottom. Okay, so for this morning's class, it is titled Company Setup and Entering Employee Profiles. It is the first online class, the first of 7 basic setup sessions that you will need to complete in order to fully build your schedule in preparation of training. And during the next hour, we're going to learn how to set global system preferences. We're going to learn how to create the titles or ranks that employees within your agency carry. We're going to learn how to create groups, which are the departments or squads that your employees belong to. And we're going to finish things up this morning by learning how to enter employee profiles. So we're going to learn how to enter your employees into the system. We're going to select what title they carry, what group they belong to. We're going to be able to set their hire date. And we're also going to learn how to enter contact information, phone numbers and email addresses, and then pay rate information. So to do that, we're going to be using the desktop application, which is what I currently have loaded up on my desktop right now. And that should have the VCS logo on the top left portion and a login field over on the far right. And we're going to log on using a generic administrative account. And that is because at this early stage, no one has their own unique usernames and passwords just yet. That's going to happen a little later during the online build. For now, we're going to type in SECADM, and that's not case sensitive. And we're going to type the same exact thing for our password. Now, this administrative login is going to be used throughout your online build. If you have multiple people who will be responsible for data entry throughout these online sessions, they will all be able to log in with the same username and password. You can have multiple people logged on at the same time if necessary. Let's click on the Sign In button. And since this is the very first class, when you log on, you're not going to see the desktop that I have displayed. This is something that you're going to learn how to build during one of the later sessions. That's class number 4, to be specific. So when you log on, if you see that this window is completely blank, don't panic. That's normal. Now, this morning, we're going to focus on screens that are found under the Administration drop-down menu on the top left portion of the screen. In fact, most of the items you're going to build, whether it's employee profiles, day off codes, overtime codes, the majority of those things will be built from the Administration menu. We're going to start things off today by going to the Company Center and selecting Application Control. Within the application control, we're going to apply global settings, options that are going to control how the system responds to things like email notifications, time zones, things of that nature. So starting from the very top, we're going to set our current schedule dates. So your current schedule dates should reflect the current year, January 1st to December 31st. And what this does is this controls the default date range that will be used on any reports you generate from our system. Your current schedule dates also affect time off usage. And in other words, at some point, you're going to have to upload everyone's time balances, or time will be applied automatically to employees' banks. The time off requests that your employees enter will have to be dated between January 1st and December 31st of 2016 in order to draw from whatever balances you upload. And yet another way of saying that is, if I upload 2 weeks of vacation into your time bank today, those 2 weeks should probably not be usable for 2017, not until you have carried those over. And that's just one of the many functions you're going to learn how to apply during your training of this system. Now, moving forward, we're not going to look at every single checkbox, thankfully. We're only going to look at the basic settings that we should apply at this time. Later on, depending on what your individual needs are as a department, you might need to come back in here and select additional options. But for now, we're going to stick with the basics. And those are allow changes to future approved days off, that's going to allow those with the appropriate privileges to modify any time off entries that have already been approved by supervisors. Next, we're going to hide pay rate on the employee statistical report. That's just a fancy way of saying we're not going to show pay rates to our employees. We might use that information as administrators, maybe even during the payroll process, but generally speaking, we're not going to show that kind of information on our system to individual employees. Next, we're going to mark Show Jobs on Daily Schedule. If I move this window over and you look at the screens in blue, these are your daily schedules. At some point, everyone is going to be assigned to maybe an administrative shift, a day shift, a night shift. But along with a shift, you're also going to be able to assign jobs. For some, that could be a patrol area. For others, it might be a particular work status like light duty, training, OIC, or FTO. And so this checkbox just makes sure that if you are assigning jobs to anyone on any one of these shifts, that they should be displayed for everyone to see. Over to the right, we want to make sure that we always email receipts. Email is a very big part of how we notify our employees of their time off and overtime requests. As those items are approved, we need to make sure that those employees receive emails letting them know that it's either been approved or denied. But we also send emails when people are reassigned. Maybe they're being moved to another squad or department. Maybe they're assigned to a training class or an extra duty job. So of course, we'll want to make sure that we always email receipts. Next, show denied days. This refers to any time off that's been denied. If an employee requests time off and it has been denied, you may want to post that information on the schedule, most especially for your supervisors. In the event someone requested a day off sometime in the future, it was denied, and now they call out sick, the supervisors have that kind of information available to them. Next, hide Social Security number is checked. If you do not plan on entering Social Security numbers into your employee profiles, just go ahead and mark that checkbox, and that field will not be available, and we simply won't collect that information. We just have a few more fields to go. So below the checkboxes, we have a field labeled Reciprocate Restriction. This refers to schedule switches or swaps. If your agency does allow employees to switch schedules with one another, you can apply certain restrictions, such as switches must occur within the same pay period, in which case just enter double P's into that field. If schedule switches can be open-ended, and even fall outside of the pay periods, enter a 0. That means there are 0 restrictions, and supervisors will then have to approve each switch request. And that, of course, means that they will have to take a look at the dates and whether or not that falls in line with your policies and procedures. We're not going to use standard hours to use for daily rate calculation. That is a payroll function. So we're just too early in your build to even fill that out. So we're going to move on to the one just below that. First day of the work week. I have mine set to Monday. Of course, if you consider Sunday to be the first working day of the week, you can go ahead and select that or select any other day. Over to the right, you're going to select your time zone. And under time format, you can choose military, 24-hour format, or standard AM and PM. This will affect how people have to enter things like time off and overtime requests. Do I have to enter those in the 24-hour format, or am I going to type something like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.? Mine is currently set to military. That's where I will leave it. And we're done. We can click on the Save button up top. And once it's done saving, it will close out the screen automatically for you. And we are ready to move on to the next screen. Before we do that, are there any questions on setting up the application control screen? Okay. And we'll have plenty of time for more questions after the session, of course, in case anything comes up. Okay. We're going to move away from application control, and we're going to select General Setup next. Very simply, we just need to enter our department name, address, city, state, zip, and phone number. Now, this information can be used for headers on various reports that you may run. And that's the only thing that you'll need to enter at this time under this screen. Are there any questions on the General Setup page? Okay. We're going to move away from Company Center now, and we're going to select List Center. We can create master lists of ranks, groups, all within this category. So we're going to look at two screens under this section. Let's take a look at Setup Groups first. And now in my system over on the left, you're going to see various departments and squads that may be very similar to what you currently have in your organization. So groups are departments or squads that people are assigned to. they're very important for several reasons. Number one, they affect how you're going to view schedules. They're going to affect how you're going to be able to generate reports. And they're also going to control how you notify people when someone within a particular group requests time off or overtime. So let's just take a look at a few examples, things that are affected by these groups. And I'll just minimize this screen for a moment. We'll come back to the desktop dashboard that we looked at a little earlier. And I'm going to click at the very bottom on what we call our weekly schedule. As you can see, it has everyone listed by the groups or squads they are currently assigned to. And over to the right, we have descriptions indicating the shifts that they are assigned to work. Group-based views are also used on the monthly schedule. So once again, you're seeing everyone assigned to administration, detective bureau, records, along with their schedules over to the right. So just using Squad B as an example, we have a group of people that work nights. And then we have a Squad D that works when Squad B is off. So they're part of different squads, but they're working the same shifts just on different days. So if I click on the daily schedule, if I'm looking at my night shift, that might be B, that might be D. Okay? But the point is that these schedule views might be useful to you, arranged in this way. So that's the first way that groups will affect how you use the system. The second way is reporting. Under the report drop-down menu up top, you're going to have a host of reports available to you for things like overtime, time off, basic scheduling reports. Every time you bring up a report screen, you'll be able to select the date range. So there's our current scheduled dates that we set in the very first screen. Here's the list of employees that we want to run a report for. So my department only has 33 employees, but maybe I just want to run a report for a specific squad. Let's click on the group button over on the right. And here is my list of groups. I can select just the ones I'm interested in reporting on. Once I'm finished with my selection, it now narrows it down just to the 19 employees within the 4 groups I marked. And now I can handpick those within the group, or I can select all 19 of my employees. Okay. So every report is going to have the same filtering options. And within those filtering options, you will be able to filter those by any type of groups you wish. Okay. So let's close that out, and let's talk about one other way that groups will affect your usage of the system. And let's go back to the list center where we were getting ready to create our groups. And over on the left, as I highlight a group, over on the right, you'll notice a tab labeled Email Destination. So I'll explain this with a scenario. If an officer in Squad A requests time off, the employee making the request should receive an email notification for their own records. In addition to the employee receiving an email, the Squad A sergeant or the supervisor of whichever department you're working on should also receive an email. That is how that supervisor or manager knows that they have to log on to the system and approve or deny that request. Once a request from the employee within Squad A has been processed, let's say it has been approved, then everyone under this column will receive an email. At the moment, that's only set to employee. Now, each group can have its own default set. Now, these are only defaults. They can actually be overridden for any individual request. So if a supervisor for that particular squad is not available, they're on vacation, the employee can send that email to someone else. Now, these are just email notifications. In other words, if you have multiple squads like I do here, the Squad A sergeant might be the one responsible for approving time off and overtime entries on most days. But any other supervisor can still view the entry for someone in another squad and approve it. They don't need the email in order to have access to the time off entry. And that's going to be handy, especially if you have supervisors that are switching with one another and covering a different squad. Now, you're not going to be able to set email defaults just yet because you don't have your employees entered into the system. The only reason why we're looking at this is because, again, we need to create groups, and now you should have a better idea as to how they're utilized in the system. So let's click on the General tab again. And to enter a new group or squad, click on the New button up top and give the group a code of 5 characters or less. And as you'll see on mine, I have admin, I have NARCD, Narcotics Division, SQ space A. I cannot go beyond 5 characters for the code. However, for the description, you have about 25 characters of length for that field. So let's just click on one of my existing ones. There's my SQA for the code and Squad A written out under the description. Under security section, you're going to leave that set to all, okay, or just ignore it. And once you've typed in those 2 fields, just click on the Save button and continue adding the rest of your groups. Now, in most cases, groups should reflect sort of your organizational chart. If you're looking at an organizational chart, you probably have a command staff or an administrative group. You probably have a patrol division, a records division or department, a detective bureau, traffic department. So you may want to use that as your guide when creating these. Are there any questions about creating our groups? Okay, let's close out and move on to the next screen within the List Center category, and that is called Setup Titles. So taking a look at my daily schedule here, you'll notice that I have sergeants, officers, detectives. I have my chief, deputy chief, and lieutenant on a separate department head shift. We need to create every type of title or rank that someone in your organization can have. To create the titles, click on the New button up top. Give it a code. Once again, it must be limited to 5 characters. Okay. Could be less, and you can use mine here as examples. You're going to enter the description of the title, and then the sort order number. So let's take a look at the chief here first. So I, of course, just use chief as the code as well as the description. And under sort order, I entered a 1. That means that is the highest ranking title in the organization. That, of course, means deputy chief is number 2. Captain is 3, and so on. Now that's going to affect how people are sorted on the schedule. For instance, looking at the day shift I have on the top left portion of the screen, my sergeant always appears above the officers because the sergeant title that I created has a lower number than the officer title. Same applies if I was looking at my department heads. Because the chief has a lower number than the deputy chief, and the deputy chief has a lower number than the lieutenant, it's going to sort it properly each and every time. Now, you'll notice I have a title for my clerks in my records department. And their number is a little higher up there. It's number 7. Now, for these folks, these civilian folks, they're never going to be compared to an officer or one of our higher ranking people because they're in their own shift. Okay? So unless you put someone like a sergeant in there that has a lower number, then the sort number may not matter as much for these types of folks. Okay? Probably is going to be more applicable on your patrol schedules, command staff related schedules, and detective bureaus. I would not focus as much on a group like, let's say, records. Now, once you've entered your code, your description, and the shift sort order number, click on the Save button up top, and that title will be added to the master list over on the left. Are there any questions on creating titles or ranks? Okay, so let's then close out of Setup Titles. And we're going to move over to our Employee Center. The Employee Center is where we can add new employees into the system, where we can enter their pay rate information, where you can create logins and passwords so that they can access the various functions that the system offers. For today, for this morning, we're going to focus on just creating employee profiles and entering pay rate information. So let's take a look at employee profiles first. Now you'll notice my employees listed on the left and a series of tabs located on the right. Luckily, you don't have to fill out every single field. We're going to focus just on the items in red, and I'll show you a couple of others that, although they are not required, you may find them useful. So very briefly, we'll go over the form, take a look at what fields we need, and then we'll enter a brand new employee profile from scratch. So for each employee profile, you'll have a series of checkboxes up top under the General tab, which allow you to categorize the type of employee this is. Are they a part-time employee? Are they on probation? Are they civilians? Are they exempt employees who cannot earn overtime? Are they crossing guards? Or are they department heads? Now, for this particular employee that I have marked, there's a checkbox labeled Pay Shift Differential. And that's because in my system I have a night shift that pays differential, and that's my way of telling the system that this person can earn that based on shift differential rules that you will learn how to create in one of your advanced training classes. Now, most of these other checkboxes are for information purposes only. However, they can be used for payroll processing. And in other words, if I need to process part-time employees differently from full-timers, then I may choose to mark part-time employees this way so that later on I can build rules that say, whenever I'm processing payroll for a part-time employee, I want to grab their regular work hours. Whereas if they were a full-time employee, I may not need that information. Okay. So it just allows you to leverage this sometime later on. Now, if there's question as to whether or not you need some of these checkboxes at this stage, just leave them blank, because we can always apply them later on when we start crossing that bridge into payroll functionality. Below the checkboxes, you have the identification section, and all we're looking for here is first name and last name. You have additional fields, of course, you're free to use. However, they will not be used in the scheduling of the employee. Under record details, each employee will have a code, which will have to be unique to that individual. I'm using first initial last name in mine, but you might choose to use something like a badge number or an employee ID number. Whichever code you choose to use, it's preferable that it's something that the employee knows. So a payroll ID may not be the best fit because not all of us know what our payroll ID numbers are. Next, we have the group that the individual is assigned to, and that is the list of the groups that we created in our previous steps. We also have the title. Okay. So with that said, before you even begin to enter your employee profiles, it would make sense to make sure that all of your titles and groups have been entered so that you'll have the right choices available on this list. At the very bottom, under seniority, this is going to affect how the employee is sorted on the schedule. Similar to titles, the lower the number, the higher in seniority. Now, if your seniority is based on hire date, you will have to convert the hire date into a numerical value, from one being the longest time there to the highest number being the newest person. And at this stage, all this is really doing is sorting your employees on the schedule. So let's once again take a look at the day shift. We know that sergeants always appear above the officers, but within these 4 officers, everyone is listed in seniority order. That means just by looking at the schedule, I know Ferguson is the most senior officer working on that shift on that day. And Diane Jordan is the most junior. Okay? And that is because, compared to everyone else, if I was to select Diane from the employee profile, she has a relatively high seniority number, or low seniority, depending on how you want to look at it. But again, the higher the number, and I only have 33 employees, so that means she's going to be close to the bottom almost every time we see her on the schedule. Now, that does not necessarily control how seniority is going to be used for time off requests or for overtime distribution. Those are established later on. So for now, I would just enter a seniority number that's going to get people listed in the appropriate order on your schedules. Now, we covered everything that's in red and even a few other items. So you can just fill out the items in red and save your profiles, and you're done. And then, of course, you just have to repeat that for every employee in your department. But I will mention that there are a few other useful fields that you can choose to use, and that is hire date and accrual date. Hire date is when that employee started working for our department. But if that employee came from another department, maybe they have 3-4 years in with another department before they came to work for us, you might have to set the hire date for that other organization and enter it under the accrual date. And the reason why we need to do this, or might need to do this, is the system has the ability to apply time off based on years of service. So if that individual came from another department is getting credit for those years, then their accrual date might not necessarily match their hire date. So for this particular employee I have highlighted, they started working on December 1st of 2015. They didn't come from another department, so in that case, both dates match. If he came from another department, and maybe the hire date was October 1st of 2010, When it comes time for him to accrue time off, or her, when it comes time for her to accrue time off, it's not going to think that she's been there a year and give her whatever step you program for year one. It's going to say, well, we actually accrue time based on her entering her 6th or 7th year of service. Okay. So that could be useful if you plan on accruing time automatically through our system. Now, in addition to the hire date, up top, you can choose to enter contact information. We would recommend adding phone numbers, especially if you plan on generating call lists to fill overtime, and you need to make those phone numbers available to whoever is filling overtime. And you'll want to make sure that you have an email address. So anytime that employee enters time off or overtime requests, we know who to send the email to when those requests are being processed. You also have a spot for text message address. This field is useful for if you plan on text messaging for overtime. So in the process of filling staffing shortages, if you prefer not to have to call each individual person one by one and just want to send text messages out instead, enter the address using the MMS format of their text address. And so if I was Verizon, for instance, it should look like that, vzwpix.com. And again, that is the MMS format of their text message address. So to enter this field, you basically need to know the carrier of the person, and you have to enter it in the right format. So let's start fresh. Let's create a brand new employee profile. We're going to click on the New button. And we're going to start entering everything labeled in red. And just tab over to get to the next field. Under the code, I've been using first initial last name, so I'll continue doing that. Next, we'll select the group or squad the individual will be assigned to, followed by their title. Now, because I have 33 employees, maybe seniority for this particular employee is 34. And you may choose to just do it based on those within the patrol division. So even though I have 33 employees, maybe only 30 are part of the sworn group. So this might be, 31. Now, although it's not a required field, I like using the hire date field. If the employee did not come from another department or agency where they will get credit for years served, then just at least make sure that the hire date and accrual dates match. At the very top, select any categories that the employee might belong to. In my case here, I think the only one I'm going to mark is pay shift differential. Okay. Depending on this person's schedule, they might be able to earn it, so I want to make sure that that is marked. Now, I'm not going to click on the Save button yet. I'm going to go right into contact information, and I'm going to enter my phone numbers, and my email addresses. And if I plan on utilizing text messaging for overtime distribution, I'm going to enter the MMS address. And at this point, you can click on the Save button, and your new employee will be added over to the left with everyone else. So you'll want to make sure that you repeat this process until you have all employees entered into the system. Now, this step might represent the data entry screen that will probably take the most amount of time for you, depending on the size of your agency. Now, you're not going to need your employees in the system in order to complete the next 3 classes. So the second, third, and fourth online classes are going to deal with different topics. So that gives you a few days as you're attending those classes to complete this particular step. It is not until class number 5 that you actually have to have all of your employees in the system so that you can start assigning them to the schedules that you're going to learn how to build. Are there any questions about creating an employee profile? Okay. The last screen that we have to look at for today is found under the Employee Center, and it is called Pay Info. Now, you may end up having to add additional values into this screen, but because of where we're at the very early stages of your build, we're only looking for the basics. If the employee has a payroll ID number, and that's the ID number that is recognized by whatever payroll system you might use, whether it's ADP, Munis, Paychex, enter that payroll ID number here. Let's skip over to standard hours scheduled per pay period. Now, our employees may not necessarily work 80 hours every pay cycle, but when it comes to their salary, that's probably how their rates are calculated and how their paycheck is calculated as well. For some of your full-time employees, it might be 80. For some of your part-timers, it might be 70 or 75. enter the value in the field, and then move over to lunch times next. If the employee has paid lunches, leave this field alone. If the employee has unpaid lunch, enter it in minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it might be. I'll just put in 60. And this is going to be useful when it comes time to request time off. If someone is on the schedule from 8 to 4, but they technically only work 7 hours, or are paid for 7 hours, whenever that person requests a full day off, we don't want to charge them 8 hours from their time bank. We want to charge them 7 hours. This is what our system is going to use to make that calculation. Okay, we're not going to click Save yet. We're going to click on Pay Rates next. Now, pay rates are only used for internal reports. They're not going to be used for payroll purposes. And in other words, if you plan on exporting out to a payroll system, 9 out of 10 times that's done using work hours. Your payroll system would remain the system of record when it comes to things like salary information. But if you wanted to run a report to see how much money you're spending on overtime, well, our system would utilize whatever rates you enter. The easiest way to do it is to enter the yearly salary in the top field, and then based on the scheduled hours per pay period, it will calculate the rest of the fields for you. Next, enter the effective date. Since this is a brand new employee, this is effective today, and we just want to add that to the salary history. That will now appear under the Salary History tab. So as this person has their pay increased, you can update the rates, add it to the salary history, and this is what our system is going to use to generate reports on how much money is being spent for overtime for various reasons. Only after I'm done with each of the tabs, I can then click on the Save button and move on to the next employee and enter their salary information as well. Now again, that salary information is optional. Okay, your payroll system will remain the system of record when it comes to this. So that's it for the Pay Info screen, and that's also the end of what we had on our agenda for this morning's class. Are there any questions, not just about this screen that's open, but any screen that we covered over the last hour? Okay. Okay. Now, just before we close out today's session, when you signed up for this class, you received a confirmation email with a link, but it also included a Basic Setup 1 guide. You will have the opportunity to download that again on the confirmation email. That will include the link to the video. But you should also see it under the Materials section under Go To Training. So you can always click on it and download that onto your computer. And that's just a series of screenshots and step-by-step instructions for everything that we covered this morning. So hopefully you find that useful. And again, that will be emailed to you soon after this class is done. Now, in preparation for your second class, you're going to learn how to create job assignments which could be patrol areas or work statuses like light duty, OIC, FTO. You're also going to learn how to enter the day off reasons like vacation, sick, and personal time that employees are going to need to have access to. And you're also going to create overtime reason codes, the reasons why people work overtime in your department. So you may just want to gather that information in preparation for that class. And that's all that we have for you today. If there's no other questions, I'd just like to thank you for your time and for registering for this class. And I would also like to invite you to sign up for our Help Out sessions. And I'd like to just bring that up if I may. And I'll just take a moment here. Okay, so this screen should look pretty familiar. You use this to sign up for this particular class. You'll notice at the very top we have what's called training helpouts. And the purposes of this is if you run into any issues building any part of your system, you can sign up for these one-on-one 45-minute sessions. They are free and they're given on a continual basis. Just select the date and time that works best for you. Click on the register button, enter your details, and a quick explanation about what you need assistance with. And after you click on the register button, you'll receive another email with the link similar to the one that you received for today's session. And it's a great way to address your department's specific needs as it relates to scheduling or maybe some of the rules set up that you're going to get involved with later on. So hopefully you use those and you find them very, very helpful. But that's all that we have for you today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. I know it's a lot of information. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be talking to you very soon. Thank you.